Are we?
Oh,
Hey, everybody. Welcome to this is number 16. So we've been doing this for a while now, James. Well, maybe not. How long have you been doing it, Stephen? And who are you, by the way?
yeah, thanks guys for having me on here today. Great discussion before getting on here. But I've been doing this for it'll be just coming up on a year, although it seems like it's been much longer. It's just the numbers you guys will get there one day. We're a little bit further ahead on how many episodes we're into on my podcast. First season we did about 50, and now we're I don't know where we're gonna end up this year, but we're at 60 plus right now, and we drop every Friday, and yeah, that's our journey so far. But it started off with just trying to figure out how to make a podcast. Um, Looking
Cool.
as far out as 9 episodes. So anyone past that, in my opinion, has made it.
Nice. Congratulations, James. Well,
Yeah.
tell me yourself, Stephen. What made you start a podcast, and what do you do in business? What do you do for fun? Tell us a couple of random facts.
Yeah, for sure. The podcast journey was kind of not planned. I didn't think that we'd be sitting here on someone else's podcast and now discussing podcasting. Let alone when I started, as I mentioned, the plan was to make 9, and the intention. My background is in sales and marketing, actually primarily in agriculture. So I worked in like corporate ag for a number of years for larger entities there, and then I kind of had this itch to get out and do my own thing, and that's a little bit of a rabbit hole of a story. But it started off with the pandemic and coming back from Costa Rica and wanting to check things off my bucket list. Or I have this banner that hangs in my gym downstairs here in the house that is what would 80-year-old you think? And it's kind of I got a list of stuff I want to do before I'm 80, and a podcast had been on the radar. So it didn't matter the success of that podcast or not, and we may be venturing down a path of actually launching a second podcast on a more narrowed in topic in the near future. But once you get exposed to the industry, I'm sure the way that you guys are too, you just see things a lot differently from people who are creatives in the space, and you kind of always want to improve. So as I mentioned, we started off with the 9, and then I heard this very dangerous short clip. I mean, I thought 9 was us making it, but there was one where the guy said once you make 90% of people don't make more than 3 episodes, the 10% that make more than 3 only make like 21 or 22. So then that's why we actually kept going past it. I saw this short clip, and then I was like, well, now we got to make 22 to be over that hurdle, or at least be there. And then the real goal was to cool it off after that. But based on the marketing company that we run, I help other folks make podcasts, and we do their marketing, and we just really want to help expose companies. Initially, it was locally here in Winnipeg, Manitoba. And so for those of us south of the border, north of North Dakota, by about an hour. So I know that's a common reference point. And, we just kind of kept going with it. People started asking to be on, and we love doing it. I think, the digital world has such big reach. Anyone who's joined us live for this session now, we're reaching people that I probably didn't think that we were going to be reaching before, and maybe likewise with you guys. So I think it's just got a great long tail on it. The more research I did into podcasting, I became just kind of more and more attracted to it, ultimately from the marketing end of things, because it just made so much sense. And I think that's a similar path, not to throw back to you guys, but where you've kind of entered in here too, and it's just great discussions to great folks that can be captured online. And one of the bigger things that came like later on, not that we were faking it, but you really can't fake a podcast. We make lots of content with other companies who are doing different things, and the classic social media stuff. You're making very dynamic and emotional tied or energy around different like videos, and you can kind of make them be presented in a certain way that's going to emotionally attach with that audience. And yeah, you want to be emotionally attached to the audience through here too, and we'll get chatting more business stuff in a minute after I'm done this. But you can't, I don't know, like I said, you flat out can't fake it. Ultimately, within the space, you're doing enough of them, and I think that's why that happy point of 22 or whatever ends up coming out. Because if you're not being genuinely yourself, you end up feeling weird if you were faking it, I think. And then you just stop doing it because it's so awkward. Maybe, or maybe, a bunch of other reasons that could be in the production side. But that's my take on it. And it's a little bit about me, I guess, in this. But startups are not new. I've been kind of doing them since I was a kid in that avenue of things. So yeah.
Cool. So you're saying we're going to reach the point of no return in 6 episodes here?
You might, yeah. Like once you, I mean, there might not be turning back. It and especially from the side of sharing the content with great folks that you have on here, you just pick up good energy off folks too. It's addictive in the way of almost like going to a trade show. You get a rush from going and networking with folks there, and it's regardless of being maybe actually let's make light of this, but actually hungover from events at trade shows. But you have that energy just stuck from leaving an event. I know many times leaving egg events, you're just totally drained from networking. You're shaking hands, you're doing other stuff, but you get a rush from it. And without that same lag of the other end of that, you get that from doing podcasts. So yeah, you guys might be stuck in here for a while.
All right, you ready, James?
Oh yeah, definitely. I couldn't agree more. I think when you get that energy of learning people's stories, right? And I think stories last, and they have that lasting, powerful effect. And I think when you have that interaction with someone and you learn their story, it only enriches your own story, and you just want to keep going with that, right? So I could completely understand that.
Well, cool. You got the good questions written down, James, so we can hammer Steven and make it.
Yeah, make me spot here.
We won't be too mean on you there. That's right. Where were you on September 5th? No, I guess the first thing I want to ask is, speaking of stories, and you had mentioned, that you've kind of been in the startup for a long time since as a kid. Tell us, your journey as, even my entrepreneurial journey started as a child too. So I understand, and like tell us how you got started to be an entrepreneur and start out on your own there.
Yeah, it's I think it started. I think it's just from being around different conversations and had kind of the perfect storm of family kind of just touching into business. And my mom was a big dreamer of different things and often talking about ideas and concepts and things that we could do. And both of my parents, I feel like I do make them incredibly nervous sometimes about what I do. They had very stable government roles and retired after 30 plus years in there. But I get a lot of inspiration from them and different kind of family members just touching in there. But I'm definitely a rarity, we'll call it. I didn't come from a family of doing the same kind of business stuff, I guess, that I'm doing today. But I can't name the first thing, but I do know it started, and then there was a moment where it really took off. And there was a funny thing I did in like grade 5 or grade 6, but I was always very conscientious of saving money at an early age. I realized spending money on toys often led to not a long lot of there was not a long play there for the happiness that came from that. They often broke or whatever the case was. And so I just started saving money, and I literally started saving for like a vehicle when I was way too young to think like that. It was strange, I'm sure, for my parents to witness that. My sister would go and spend her birthday money or whatever on different things, and I was just like hoarding it. But there was this very pivotal moment, grade 7, grade 8, where I'm from here. The elementary school I went to had this program called Space Camp. And yes, that sounds incredibly nerdy. I was not a space like guru, or like it wasn't high on my, we'll call it, bingo card for grade 7, grade 8. I just knew it was something that we did though. And so we went out to Montreal, Canada for this. So it's a plane ride and stuff over there. It's a couple provinces over. And just in case geography, I've been in enough settings where not everyone knows that is. So we had to start saving money, I guess, for this camp like a year ahead. And although I was a good saver for personal little wins, like I said, like, I don't know, kind of doing chores and all this other stuff. I was playing, everyone's playing hockey young and you're playing competitive, going on trips and stuff, and everything's kind of, I don't know, mom and dad are covering that. And so I come home with this thing saying like, hey, like, you're going to this space camp. And I'm kind of like, here you guys go. Sweet. That was kind of, I don't think it was that extreme, but I'm like, all right, there's the camp thing. Here you guys go. And I think the total cost estimated for that trip was like $2,500. So not a small amount. And they give you a heads up for a year. You can do like all these fundraising activities through the school. So there's opportunity to do that. I'm like, okay, I'll do a little bit of that, I guess. I'm not really thinking a whole lot. My parents both sat at the kitchen table at night. Like, we'll think about it. And I'm kind of like, think about it. I was like, what are we taking time to think about? Like, we got to go to this camp, I guess, the year following. And they came back to me and presented me with the situation that I was going to have to pay for it. And it was going to be a good learning. And I wasn't it didn't take it kind of any way other than, okay, cool. Like, this is a goal. And, worked hard for the next year and a half or, a couple summers cutting grass. And that's what really, for the neighbors and asking how I could make money, and was not afraid to go talk to neighbors, go knock on doors as like this 12-year-old kid, which is kind of crazy. But, saved up, paid for that trip. I genuinely was a little disappointed when I got back. I was like, man, like, that was like, I don't know if it was worth it. That was a lot of time. And so like an energy to do that. So I'm not so convinced this, whatever. It was still a really great trip and whatnot. But for a lot of kids, I'd say in that class, they didn't have the same experience because it wasn't from their own piggy bank. And from that moment on, I definitely respected money a lot differently. And then I think that just kind of trajectory, things for me, because then I kept saving for that vehicle, but now I had created a lawn business. And then that got really weird because by the time I was 15, I started subcontracting stuff for jobs. I would get to work and then figure out how to do it afterwards. Things like laying sod, which where I just said to a guy, he's like, do you think you could resod my yard? I said, no problem. It's just like laying carpet. And I've done that before, which I hadn't done neither of them. It was just that slick line that came out of my mouth. And I think I went home, sweated, and I figured out both how to lay sod and how to buy it wholesale. So not only did I do that guy's lawn, but then I started reselling sod and then charging people halfway between wholesale and retail and making money off that. So it was a win, and et cetera. And then you kind of get down that rabbit hole of, okay, now what's next? How are we doing? What's the next thing? I got to hire someone with a bobcat, and that just kind of kicked things off. And I did everything from working on golf courses, where it was the first job where I ever worked for someone else, and then started selling shoes for this Adidas outlet locally, and then Safeway, the liquor store, continued to do my own thing. And that was kind of the start of it. I don't want to grab the mic for too long in here. I could just keep going, but that's kind of how it started with camp, and ultimately turned into the first kind of, I guess, side business as a kid. We never went really formal. I was doing those invoices on Excel and very basic programming, very different from what we have now for running companies, for sure. But as an early stage, that was where I found comfort, and definitely feels good to be back in the space of kind of running control of what you're doing ultimately.
Well, cool. So it seems like that trip paid off after all, right? Maybe not the trip itself,
Yes.
but everything it did, and on the back end, kind of. So then,
100%.
were you always an entrepreneur since then, or so you said you come out of sales? So were you employed in between, or was it always your own businesses?
For a long time, it was like, even when I was in university. So I had a lot of influence from my parents. Again, lovely to go to university. It was like the dream, where they, even to their further thought of where they bought their house in Winnipeg to kind of raise us in. It was a bus ride away from the university. Like, there was a lot of thought for a long period of time, because that was something they had a little bit more exposure to later on in their journey. So they both gone back and taken formal education, through their roles and stuff, but they kind of always wished that they would have went earlier on. So kept doing the landscape thing until just after university. A funny story in the university time frame, though, because in agriculture, and anyone who listens to this, or if anyone from my ag class listens to this, they know that the agricultural chem rep jobs for summer students are very desired. And I'd worked on a family friend's farm at the time, and that's actually kind of how I got into ag. I didn't really want to go to university, but I was recommended that I go into agriculture because I like being outside and I like talking to people. I'd probably be a good salesman in the egg space. Lo and behold, I got hired for a summer job. I actually had a couple offers my first year, which was kind of unheard of. And I'm a city kid, all things considered. Even though I'd worked on a farm, I was not born and raised on a farm, so I got kind of a little bit of gears given to me getting into the faculty in a great way. But I remember in one of the interviews they're asking me, so if you do this job, you're going to have to stop cutting grass. And I said to them, no, I can't do that. I make too much money doing it. And they're like, really? And I feel like the interviewers at the time were kind of like just trying to play a game on this one company. They're like, well, what are you really talking about here? Like, come on. And I didn't really realize at the time what we were pulling in versus what was maybe normal. That would have just been my normal. And the harder I hustled, the more I made. And just kind of, but over a summer, you were pulling in, what a lot of people do in like a year at the time, right? I mean, there's expenses that come along with that too, but we were doing very well. And ultimately, then I did take a role with another ag company for that summer. I was with them for like 7 years full on, 2 years as a summer student, and then 5 years or 4.5 years as a full-time employee. And then there was a number of mergers and acquisitions through that time period that led me to be fired for the first time from that company I thought I was going to be with for 30 years because it was great. They treated us well, had good growth with that company, and that kind of came as another, we'll call it, turning point in the career where I started to really look at things differently. But that came with some other benefits too, just like we'll reference the camp story again. But you walk into those other situations, and little did I know. I'm gonna keep going for a second here. This is kind of a cool story, James. But it's
yeah, please do.
I don't know. Have you ever been fired before? I don't know if this is a weird thing to ask, but
no, I have, and I think it's one of those pivotal things where you kind of learn. Like, I mean, of course, you're angry at first, because it's kind of
100%.
ruined your,
Yeah,
but like, I think exactly right. Yeah, you're like,
Yeah.
oh, that was not my future plans, but
yeah,
I think it's one of the things that reminded me of my entrepreneurial youth, and then it suddenly clicked to me of like, well, maybe I shouldn't leave my whole financial future in control of somebody else, right?
100%. That's exactly where my brain went to the first time that happened. But it was such an emotional roller coaster. No one really
Oh,
put
yeah.
plans you for that, and especially when you are a dedicated, hardworking employee, it's like 10x worse. Like I think some people
Yes.
could have kind of been like more on the radar, honestly, but I was the only like unmarried, no kids. When I look back on it, I'm like, totally makes sense. That was an easy call. That would have been very disruptive for in a bigger way for other folks. You kind of rationalize it after and whether that be the case of the whole reasoning, whatever. But you take it kind of hard. But the interesting thing that happened after that, I go into panic mode. A little emotional roller coaster that comes after it. But I'm kind of glad it happened when it did. A lot of people don't have it happen until later in the career. And then it kind of just instantly I was like, this is kind of I don't want to say superpower because it did happen again. A few years later, there was lots of mergers and different growth things or whatever, but it was kind of like, no big deal. Like, I'm still going to give it 120. But the next company I went and interviewed with, enough years have passed. This is kind of funny to mention too, but it's like, I go into that interview process, and because they were in the same space of agriculture, but they approached me with an offer that they thought was going to be less than what I was making, and it was like a substantial raise. But just from how hard I was working and what they saw from the outside in, they were like, "Oh, he must be around here, so we might as well just go right to our max for this role that we need to fill, and then we're going to grow him in here." So nice. I'm like, cool. I didn't know we could do this, and that's a super interesting thing, right? If you're not getting, not to tell people to jump ship in any which way, because it's great to be dedicated to a company. Just the way that it kind of unfolded for me was different, and then it kind of made you a little less loyal for the next one, though, because you're like, once bitten, twice shy. Like, how hard are we gonna go here? Because I know whatever. And then I just don't really have the off button though. So go hard again. And then the same thing. Well, I just, the next opportunity that came up was a similar situation of, I ended up leaving that role to go do this startup in Canada. But the reason that came across their desk and a recruiter found me was because of that other company and that shorter experience after that. So it was just like everything kind of happened. It didn't necessarily fall into play, whatever cliche we could use there, but it was kind of an interesting journey, and then definitely made me more kind of, you got to look out for you first at the end of the day. So making sure, I started thinking it more along the lines of like, okay, what am I going to do? But I had these great opportunities that came up right after that. And then shortly after that, though, was about that same time, so the world kind of shut down for a bit. And I'm like, I got to start checking stuff off the list here. I'd kind of been working on a couple little projects, and then just the way that it happened, yeah, a couple things happened. I started them at the same time. When we had downtime, it was like the opposite of still and whatever. I picked off projects and started a couple companies, and then things got kind of busy, and they've adjusted a little bit over that period of time, and being involved in some other startups in that journey too, and helping other folks grow was kind of ultimately where I found to be the niche. Realistically, I did that in ag for almost a decade, and I thought I've had some incredible training from those companies too. There's as much as some of the storylines don't end the greatest, those companies really do invest in their people. To the point where, after the fact, I would have been so happy to stay with that one company for, I think, quite a number of years, maybe look to go to other roles, but you don't realize till you're out of them for a period of time. Now we try to do it. My company is, attend a training or a big trade show once a quarter. But we used to do stuff probably every 2 months with that company for training, whether it be virtual or in-person training. And you kind of take for granted when you're there that is really an upside. So you got to take that on yourself and figure a way to afford it, number one, because some of those trainings are pretty expensive, as you find out when you're on your own what those actually cost to go for.
Yeah.
But so worth it if there's one thing that you take away from that, ultimately. And yeah, so anyways, that's kind of where that journey has led us to today, at the tail end of here. So it's been awesome, and it doesn't come without 20x the learnings when you're full on your own, and you do leave the comfort of the last job. And there was nothing wrong with the last job I left either. I ended up getting into the real estate space for a bit, and for that experience, it was a great experience with some great folks I knew locally here, but also because it was an opportunity to manage way more people and do more recruitment for them. So it was kind of putting me in more of a manager seat, or in this case, it was called like a team leader of Keller Williams brokerage. And that's kind of seen as like the little CEO of the office there. You get to hire, train, and develop culture within that space. And, did that for a couple of years. I didn't know where that was going to take things. But then ultimately just helped, again, lots of training, different experiences, that take you to leave to be on your own. We got to the point where they're like, we need you to, we want you and need you to grow this thing more. And I was kind of at a point in the road where I'm like, yeah, I could go and take this from, just some numbers here. We're recruiting 4 agents a month. And they're like, well, they knew I had my own stuff going on too. They're like, well, if you did this full time, like full, you could probably do 10. And I'm like, I think this is the turning point again here where I got to go on my own. Cause I could, but I'm at like a crossroads right here on this other startup I was doing at the time. And it was a weird way to leave because we were growing like crazy and we were having good success. It was a really strange way to leave and give them lots of heads up, but it was, all good. But then, yeah, there's definitely 3 to 6 months of scary watching things maybe don't grow as quick as you think. It takes a lot longer when you truly do go on your own and you don't have a paycheck backing up, that balance sheet for your startup. Ultimately, it becomes a little, ultimately you guys are kind of in the space too. I think it really boils down to, risk, and then how long you're willing to like chase that risk down. I think a lot of folks become successful just because they stick around longer. And others quit early. There's that famous like meme where someone's like chipping away to get to the mine and there's this far to get to the gold and the other person's just getting started kind of thing. I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about, right? And it's like, you just kept going. Maybe you just needed more time.
So so you have in your business, you have employees, I'm assuming, right? So what has affected you being or having been an employee yourself and having switched between companies? I had technical glitches, but I kind of figured out what the story was. So how has that affected how you treat your employees in your company right now?
That is an awesome question. I reflect on it lots, and I have recently installed this like weird corner bookshelf thing. But I do quite a bit of reading on different things and try to learn from those experiences. And I would consider this kind of like the area of more self-reflection on like the emotional intelligence behind everyone's like EQ within the team. So I have a mentor that we actually now do business with on the marketing side. It's kind of a weird, great thing that has evolved. But I've taken a lot of notes off of his name's Chad's book, and one of the things that he does. And I say this, we're not actually quite there yet, but I kind of take snippets from this. He makes everyone that works with him take this the Kolbe test to figure out how they fit into the company on personality types. And so we haven't done that with my folks yet. We have a lot of part-time people helping out, and as we grow, we're making them more permanent within our team right now. Fractionally filling small things and then growing with those folks. And one of the things we just even had a situation where one of the folks kind of low-key dropped the ball for showing up for a couple meetings this week, and I kind of knew that they did, and I kind of looked at it like, it's a little not for text is tough. So is email. There's no tone. So it's how you read it is kind of weird sometimes. I always try to put a little bit of a lighter tone on everything, just to be like, are they really, what's the temperature here? And if it does really feel angry after the tone is kind of gone later on, then I'm like, okay, well, maybe we need a phone call or something, whether that be with a client or someone else you're working with, whatever it is. But I just kind of approached that conversation this week with like, person X. We've been almost working together for a whole year. This isn't like you. Let's just move on for next week and be better. I don't even want to meet today, really. Take the rest of the day off, like kind of thing. Like I just treat it as totally like, sometimes people just need a week off or a day off and they don't know how to ask for it because they're high drive individuals. And I think leading with empathy in those situations, there becomes a point, I think, where you might have to make the decision. And I have had to do that historically in different roles where you got to let someone go. But I think I look at it a lot differently as time goes on because they're people. Like we were saying before, James, like it stings. And, trying to communicate and have enough heads up with everyone on that journey. I think clear communication around goals. I often do, lead with like, do you have enough information? I'm giving very micro examples, but I wasn't sure on this question right away. But there's, always try to ask like, do you have enough things to get your job done and stuff, and then just try to support them as best you can to do different things. We're in a different age now. Great people are hard to find. Good people are hard to find, but great people are hard to find. And we work with some great people. And 9 times out of 10, minus that example I just said there, they're outperforming what my expectations are anyways, because I'm not coming at them like a dictator in the conversations that we have anyways. So out of the gates, that conversation goes a lot better. And, that comes from experience having other different styles of management. I'm not saying that anyone was bad because they're on their own journey and probably for their training at different stages of my career, then that was probably the best of their abilities at the time. So I always kind of reflect on those experiences I have had before and then, integrate that into leading with, do you have all the information that you have, give them more of the responsibility ultimately, and then try to put I'm sure you guys have seen this stuff too in terms of like the coaching side, but it's like ultimately you want to try to, I don't know, enable them to have more power or superpower over their job. The times when I perform the best, I look back and reflect on those moments too. And I think, okay, all right, how are we going to bring that to this point? And some of them had to be doing with like, how big was the reward for some of the stuff that we were doing or how big was that carrot? And ultimately along with that, regardless of it being a financial gain in some cases, did I believe in what we were doing? Pardon me. And did I like who I was working with? That really drove the boat on a lot of getting more work done. So, what can we do? And I try to incentivize my team a little bit more than average too. On that note, there is a I get dangerous when I hear a clip that I think makes a lot of sense. By the way, we're gonna cover that. I heard about this,
the whole business.
Like, who knows if this was even true? Like, I didn't fact check this, nothing, but I heard it a couple times. It was on my algorithm. Now it's going to be on yours too. Plumbing or electric, I might have the trade wrong, but this guy said that he paid his employees double. He doubled their hourly rate. I don't know how he would, whatever, but I mean, trades does it, and he said it completely changed their life in a year. He said he watched them. I don't know, you guys probably maybe seen this way, you're nodding, but he said like they bought nicer cars, their kids went to nicer schools. He didn't have an issue with retention. So whenever I can, I do pay out like bonuses if we hit little goals. We're still trying to figure out like what are the goals, because things happen so frequently or infrequently within the small to almost like I don't know if we're quite medium yet, but it almost feels like we're kind of moving that way, just in how we're following procedures and making it a little bit more formal and all the boring stuff that comes along with it, but it's super necessary to scale. But I think if we do that and then treat people well along the journey, it's a job. They have an entire life outside of it. I know the old school way used to be get stuff done. We also try to invest in tools and different AI tools to help make efficiencies. I've made it incredibly clear within the team we're not getting rid of people. We're just going to grow them because we're so small. Like, we're not at the stage of scaling down. So don't worry that we're adding a tool in. It's just like we're going to get more stuff done. Such as the the editing tool that we mentioned before. It was one of the things where my editing guy is like, oh, I don't know, isn't that kind of taken away from my job? And I'm like, this thing's going to rate it and make us that much more efficient. Like, think of how much more work we can get done with it, and then we don't have to sweat it. Yeah, it could be a little bit better, but if it can make it 80% and it saves us 4 hours, like, it's kind of hard to say that that's not like a great trade-off. And I mean, one of the limitations I think of people not considering other tools like that in the AI space is very dangerous, because they're going to have to invest that human power to do that same thing, and it's just you're in an endless game of catch up. You'll never catch those other people. They're going at like Mach speed. They're driving a Ferrari. You're on an e-scooter, kind of thing. So yeah, that's kind of how I'd say like we best manage from those experiences historically. But is there ever room for improvement? Heck yeah. There's stuff that just like get better with like clarity around communication. I mean, one of the bigger issues with today's day and age, and the majority of the team is virtual with us as well, so they're not local to me, which I find incredibly interesting because we get very different perspectives from geographies, which I love. We have everyone from New York to Vancouver, Canada, like coast to coast. So time zone's a little tricky, but different perspectives, amazing. And just trying to like learn from them too. We hire them to be experts in certain areas of what we're doing, and that's ultimately I try to, as best I can, listen as much as I'm chatting here. And I love to talk in general, but I try to take their guidance on different things, because they'll come up with something way better. And slowing down calls on Fridays, we try to do this thing where actually that's how we got on here. We took a slow Friday call and we found that button on StreamYard, Stefan, and that's how I messaged you, because I was like, hey, what else are we missing on here? I don't want to move too fast and put the blinders on. So me and Jeff, video editing guru from my team, we just chatted, pretty casual, didn't get a lot done, so to say, like on the productivity, pendulum. Someone else would have probably looked at it and been like, what were you doing? If someone was managing me from the outside in, they'd be like, what the heck was that hour about? But found this, started sending DMs and started networking with other folks that are in the podcast space. So that's a fun example of like, just trying to slow it down, because we can move fast all day, but maybe it's not in the right direction. And, even though we haven't figured out, always reevaluating, what worked. We do that with the marketing side too, though, right? Like month-end reviews on companies, what performed, and then, try not to be the shoemaker's kid gone barefoot though, because we help other folks make podcasts and theirs are way better than ours. But so that's kind of how we, always try to improve on managing folks. But there's always something to learn from people.
Yeah, definitely. And I fully agree. Doing nothing or doing something that doesn't require, maybe even 10% of your capacity is so powerful, right? That's why I built a little AI tool, because we have different different task list here, project management tool here, different companies, whatever. So I built a tool where I can just record an audio note, and then it figures out where that belongs, and then it enters it. So then sometimes when I do something really simple, like James always makes fun of me for I do my books in just a Google Sheet and not some fancy QuickBooks, whatever, because I just don't like them. James convince me otherwise, but not yet. So I just do something simple where I just like look at my bank account and I just like dumbly enter numbers in a spreadsheet, and then I'm like, oh, got this idea. I just record the audio note. The AI figures out where to put it, and then so that I think that's super powerful. Just do something super simple. Don't use more than 10 or 20% of your capacity, and then that's when your brain kind of has all those ideas, and then have it. That's where I think AI is awesome. Capture those ideas, put them where they got to be. Because if you don't have to figure out where do I put that idea, which task management tool, which notes app, whatever. Now it's like, now I'm really fed up with having ideas. But if you can just talk about it for 20 seconds, AI does its thing, and then you can move on to the next one while you do that mundane, simple thing that doesn't require your capacity. I think that's super powerful. So great thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's maximizing the tools you already have too, right? I think oftentimes we get stuck as entrepreneurs of trying to figure out what's the next best platform, what's the next best tool.
Yeah.
And sometimes we don't take the time to utilize the tools we already have. And so taking, like you recommended, like a slow Friday and actually just looking at the tool you have, what else do they offer through this? And are we maximizing our use of it? And that can go from an employee, of maximizing their time and what they want to achieve in their life, as well as, as the platforms and, looking at your customers, did we maximize what we were able to do for them? And yeah, I think we get so stuck in looking at what's next instead of just looking at what we already have.
You know what, can I add something to the question from before? This is like maybe a weird thing that I do, but because of those experiences with like being let go or whatever, bought or whatever you call it, you have canned. It's happened a few times. But I also ask my people, do they enjoy what they're doing still? Because I don't want to ever trap anyone either in a situation. I don't know if that's a strange thing to do. Probably once every 2 months though. It's almost been like a year, and I kind of throw it in there once in a while when we're like chatting on calls, like again, because a lot of it is virtual and we have to be so focused on the calls and like getting work stuff done. We text a little bit, email a bit, but then it's kind of everyone's communicating on different email strains and just kind of getting the work done. And I always want to make sure, like, are you happy? And are you staying around anyway? Like making sure that they're, not going anywhere. I'm always kind of like, maybe overly sensitive now that I'm saying it about that whole aspect of like, we're working together on this project ultimately. And, just making sure that their heads in the game to be, along for the ride too. Because if they are growing out of it and want to go do something else, I just want to have enough heads up to plan. I wouldn't rush them out of it, but it's just like, let's make sure that we, are looking at things. And, part of the reason for bigger stability with, making a standard operating procedure kind of template for everything that we do is so important. To slow down, we've been kind of editing and adding to that over the last few months, just because we've added other things that we do. And if you don't go back and, add to that, then you can find yourself in a situation where you're like, hey, how the heck do we do this? Even though they're, tech has updates and stuff where it changes on you anyways. So those screenshots will not look the same in a year from now, but you'll have an idea of what we were doing. But that's something else that I ask folks is like, are you happy? Because I don't know if anyone has ever asked me that in my roles. It was always like, oh, you weren't really doing this. I'm like, well, do I even like this job? Like I remember one of you not going so good at the company I liked, and I'm like, who are you? Like, I don't even like this right now. It was just a period of time where we had a really crummy spring, and that was it's just you're subject to the weather and stuff. And I remember that popping in my head later on and being like, I should always ask people that, make sure that they're whatever. Seems like a question I would have liked to be asked. So, fill that gap, and I'm sure someone else is gonna take something that I've done in like the leadership position now and been like, I would have done it differently, right? Everyone's got their own way to slice that bread. So
yeah, definitely. So you said something before that I hope you won't regret it that you said that, but on that. So you said you're not really sure what the goals are. So tell us a bit about your goal setting process and maybe things that you think you could improve, because
For sure.
You give me a nugget there, so I had to.
100%. No, it's a good question, because some people have called me out on that before. They're like, "What do you mean? What do you mean you have like an A and a B?" Because I also have the book like Burn the Boats and stuff. Our direction is in marketing and podcasting, but I don't want to force business. So we have goals in certain avenues for us in terms of how many clients we want to bring on, and of course like monetary goals within that. But the reality is, we've had enough experience. I'll call it enough life experience that even within the beginning part of this year, we took on a client that was a referral. It was a little out of our specific genre of work we normally are in, but I was pretty confident we could help them. So I wanted to take on this company and this brand and these products that they were selling, but ultimately it was a tough thing to manage in terms of the relationship within that space. I think it was a little bit about where their head was at and their expectations of the results that were going to come. In the marketing space, it doesn't happen overnight. It's just repetitive and consistency and making it very clear in your story sharing there. So we still finished off very strong with them and proved that we could grow, I guess, kind of in any industry, but trying to find that healthy balance of not forcing that thing to happen. I've been in enough situations where I think we could go out and grow a lot of companies, and reading different books, they say very different things here, but kind of a flow with the energy kind of thing. If we were to land 3 more clients next month for our marketing company or 3 more podcasts, we'd be thrilled. But the reality is right now for our team size, we should only take 2 of those 3. And us just figuring out, like, we're adding 2 people this month to the team. They're going to help alleviate a lot of that. So we probably would be able to take on more in the future, but our cap right now would probably be 10 fractional clients or 10 podcasts. It's just a lot of things to manage, even with a 7-person team. So when I say that, we kind of have an A and a B, like, hey, like if this is going well, we're going to put more gas in the tank and go here with it. And if it slows up, we're still, another book that I've read, I like to reference, but profit first, make sure that we're profitable. We're not overextended. We're playing it kind of safe here. And we want to be around for the long play within the space. So just trying to grow healthy. I've been in tech startups before. And so as far as like having a solid plan where it's like do or die kind of energy, we don't really have to be that. I'm not so sure it fits in our culture and where my head's at nowadays anyways. So we do have set goals behind that, but I find the more stuff that we do in different capacities, such as one-on-one meetings, than truly helping companies out without it always being a monetary exchange, which sounds crazy to say perhaps on a business podcast, but a lot of the time we do throw out free advice. Today I had 2 meetings that were like that, and it's going to lead to work for us. We're going to be sending out proposals to those companies, but a lot of people want to get that money up front, be like, oh, anytime that we spend this, that, whatever. But I don't always want to be seen as like the great, good guy, soft guy, or whatever, nice guy that people can walk over. But at the same time, I think you're kind of the energy that you attract out there. And also, as I mentioned before, kind of to the point of having before the podcast, not getting in the weeds, but from having a poor experience where I think someone was really just trying to force their way in the service industry to get more clients, that ended poorly. And I know from other folks that we live in basically a big small town. That's not going so well for that individual. And that's not anything I've, done said after that. I'm quiet, from that. It's just that energy cycle, I think, follows you. Without sounding too hippie on the podcast about business, but I really strongly believe on that note. And I always struggle with like the corporate and hippie Steve that evolves up here. Part of me loves to go out and cycle. And if we have downtime where we've, don't have as many clients, I think health is an area that I invest a lot more into for myself personally. So if I could be in the best shape and have less business, sick. So it's an interesting thing to maybe look in and dive into, but without health, you don't have anything. And, there is a little bit of a trade-off when you are growing your business to some capacity for that routine that you may want in the future. But just hearing other people talk about their experiences in businesses really influenced how I approach the growth of what we're doing. And, you can go out and make an extra 20K next month, but is it going to cost you half? Or, like that trade-off there of like, what's the expense along with that? Is it the same quality work? All the growing pains. So we're just trying to be as healthy as possible. When I say we don't have a one set goal, we kind of have two. We have a low and a stretch goal for us. Everything lines up great. I get to be incredibly active and hit that stretch goal. Things don't work out, keep my health and sanity, and we stay at that level for the company. And we have it pretty set in place for, and then you have the responsibility of salaries or and paying for those folks too. So we want to be confident that we can keep them around even in what would be considered a slower month. We do have like a contingency plan if someone didn't renew, and just kind of approach that in a couple different ways. So yeah, that's probably a different answer than maybe most, but that's how I'm doing it right now, and it seems to be working. So
yeah, that's fantastic. Because I think number one, you have to remind yourself, why did I become an entrepreneur, right? Why don't I want to be an employee? And it's because you not only have business goals, but you also have personal goals too, right? And you want to be in control of, when you're going to be able to get out and ride a bike, and, taking care of your health and preventing burnout. And I think so many entrepreneurs don't do that. They get stuck into looking at just the numbers,
100%.
and then and then they burn out, and everybody quotes 90% of businesses end within 3 to 5 years, and I think we never stop to think that maybe that's because we weren't being very good entrepreneurs. It's
Right.
you gotta have that balance. So I think that's great goal management, because it's not only goals for your business, but it's also goals for the way that you want to, treat yourself, but also the culture and the atmosphere of your business. And the people that work for you are going to see that too, right? And so then they have confidence in having that balance in their lives too.
I hope so. It's something I definitely encourage for sure. I can't go. You could take a horse to water, give them the opportunities there, but they have to really want it as well. And it's not something we like force everyone to take a 5K walk every day or anything, or get the 10,000
Right.
steps in. But I know maybe one day we could have like a strong enough influence in folks to encourage them. I think that's one of the first things that in my routine side of things is, and I get out of it too. It's not perfect. There's periods of time where you get out of that routine, but ideally work out for like an hour in the morning kind of thing at least, and take that time. As soon as I get back into the routine, it's like it gets more awesome. Today I
Yeah.
accidentally woke up at 5:30 in the morning and started my routine, and it's like I was up. I'm like, okay, I guess we're back on schedule for this whole early riser thing, man. I just self-talk, man. I'm like, all right, well, yep, we're good. No more 6:36. It kind of just kept getting earlier, and then this cycle up at 5:30 in the morning. And now you don't have to be that way either. I have my sleep in days. I had a day last week and I just totally felt a little like, well, we sent out a few proposals, stuff in your question there, but we had a lot more work coming in. I was like, oh man, we got a lot of stuff in the queue coming up here, but it's good. But felt that energy, and you try to put your best, put forward in these other companies. And if we ever get in a position where we're kind of ahead of schedule, we always just try to add more into those companies, because if they grow more on our marketing side, or even helping them with whatever it is, spend a little bit more time in there, it's going to come back. And I think that's kind of showed with like the renewals that we've had within clients, and rather work with great people along the journey than force something to happen. So yeah.
Well, cool. I got another question. I'm hoping that people get value out of that, and I always like asking people, what are your biggest mistakes? And maybe if just one person can avoid a mistake that you've made, that's already a success. So what are your biggest mistakes?
I think again, I'm gonna go a little hippie here. The universe has got some weird ways with the whole energy thing. I've ended up having some great conversations in the last year with kind of accepting that a little bit more. And I think taking time and not forcing stuff to happen. There's deadlines, and there's definitely in my mind kind of more the visual I have when I think like the forcing thing. It's like it's in a tech startup. It's the Wall Street energy. It's like we got to go and hit this goal, this date and stuff. And the last 2 weeks have been a crazy example that I was signed up for a trade show out of Toronto to get in for real estate investing coaching. It was one of the things I wanted to, or real estate. Yeah, like they're going to coach you on how to invest in real estate, I guess, basically. And while I'd signed up for that, I'd also given up the opportunity to go on a bachelor party with some good buddies I grew up with. It's kind of one of those things. I'm like, wait, I'm already signed up. I'm committed to this thing. Shitty timing, pardon me, but like, same weekend, but I'm already going here. And then I was just kind of whatever different dates for confirming hotels and stuff like that. Even though it's signed up, I still get a refund on some of this stuff. And then I had an actual real estate opportunity fall on my lap. We're still working through it right now. So I don't know the result of that, but I'm now no longer going to the conference. I'm actually doing the thing. So I don't know how crazy manifesting is, but I literally got a text that was like, hey, do you know anyone interested in, XYZ style property? And I was like, yeah, me. And that's kind of led us down a rabbit hole. So it's super weird. Like I'd say just go slower. Like the stuff that I've like forced or had, we'll call it bad emotional management, whether that be excited or frustrated and been like, just this thing. I think if I would have taken, a day, a week, 20 minutes, I don't know what the time frame would really be. But to make a better decision there, regardless of, the excitement around the thing. I mean, whatever, those things all ended up being good lessons or something else. I always look silver lining, like more positive has come from it. But I think just taking time when you're getting into it and really look at that time trajectory ultimately, because as more entrepreneurs, hopefully someone's listening to this, but as mentioned before about that risk tolerance, how big is your risk taking ability? Not to say you don't want to be a gambler out there, but calculated risks in terms of like, is that a $2,000 risk with a 5x ROI, or is that like are you willing to invest 10K in yourself or your company for the long play and longevity of this thing to like be viable, and is it going to be here for 5 years? It's a lot of it's a different way to look at it than I can make this much the first year and we're going to grow the next year kind of thing. It's like, hey, like if we do these core things right, other stuff, whatever, I'm going to call it 3 years of being on my own. Now it's like stuff starts to gravitate towards you once your name's out there. People know that you're in different spaces. It's like that kind of over the first big hump, I think, of business, and then it's proving yourself after that. We'll see. I haven't got that far yet. I'm kind of predicting it on that end, but I think taking time, and yeah, not rushing those things. Like if it seems too good, it might be. And yeah, just doing your best to take time for you at the end of the day. That's just a me personally thing. Other folks might find their space in different things. I try to take time to go for a bike, as I mentioned, or sauna. I'm not getting too preachy on the health thing. It's just more I put down the phone and I have to just be in my own head, because a lot of time today, we're either on here, our thumbs are guiding the interaction, or we're on the phone, or doing video calls like this, which is great. But taking that own time to really find yourself within that mix, because as I mentioned, working for other startups, other big companies, you get very excited even working for them, and it's great. But that comes at I would say in some ways like a cost, to you, and like you're following that path for them. But is that the best thing for your health and everything else, that relationships, a little earlier on in the journey, but I'm sure like other roles have had affected personal relationships, just in terms of how much travel, how much time. Very happy where I am today, but I'm just saying that out loud. Like no regrets when I make that comment too, but just take that time within whatever space you're in. I think that would be my biggest piece of advice for anyone out there. And yeah, make the right decision, the one that you're comfortable with too. If it was a really good deal, it'll happen again. Something else will come back there. Something will change out of everyone's control. Interest rates will drop. Who knows? Whatever that will go. Some silver lining will come out of it if you don't take advantage of it right away. But don't be afraid to take the jump either, I guess, too. Take that risk. It feels really good. You can always go back. I see this one the other day. Around one more minute here on this one, but either way, you might work till you're 65. I don't know if you've seen that one, but it's like, if you don't take the risk, you might work till 65. And if you do, you still might work till you're 65, like the average person. But if you're willing to take that risk, you might not have to you know, in terms of that goal of being time and freedom. But I think if you're a true entrepreneur, you never really put it down. You're still going to be doing something. Like there's no retirement. Like I always like back to my first thing there. What would 80-year-old me think? I'm going to do hopefully this stuff till I'm 80. I don't know. That's part of the health play too. It's just like, I mean, that's like compounding. If you take care of yourself and can do more years or more reps than someone else, then that's the win. You just outpaced them. So we'll see. I'll find out. But we'll timestamp this. Is we'll find out down the road. But you know, talk's cheap, action works. You know, too. So take action on that stuff ultimately.
Yeah, definitely. And it's, you know, if you make it feel like work, then you want to get out that as soon as possible. But if it doesn't feel like work, then why not keep doing it, right? So that's kind of my opinion. Well, cool. We're coming up on the top of the hour. James, if you want to slide in a little question that's been burning for the last half hour, go ahead.
No, not at all. I think that's a great place to stop. And you know, Stephen, thanks for taking the time out and visiting with us today and sharing your awesome entrepreneurial journey. And we definitely wish you the best of continued success there, and may you grow at the pace that you want to grow at. And you know, it sounds like you have multiple ideas as well, and I think that's the entrepreneurial curse, is you always have the good ideas for what to do next, right? So so thank you for the wise words. Really appreciate it, and I know it settled in on me, so I appreciate that.
Well, much appreciate you guys. Thanks for having me on. Great to network, and looking forward to chatting more in the future here with Stefan and James. Thank you both.
Yeah, we got something scheduled on our calendar. I don't know when, but at some point it'll pop up, and then we'll talk to you soon. Awesome.
Absolutely.
Thanks for being on here. Thanks for sharing your story, and have a good night. Talk to you soon. Thanks, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.